Yeah, so hi everyone, welcome to this PASS lecture. PASS is a collective of students who organize events like this to create communities and um, to help us link in to the world outside of just studying architecture and help us build like relationships with the outside world to help inform us to be great architects. So today we have a very special guest, and I'll let Ben introduce him.
Yep. Hey guys, we've got Oren, and we've got not Oren, we've got Joe, sorry, from USE. He's got a great lecture today which links into our theme about ecologies of communities. So yeah, we'll let him take it away. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, thanks very much, Ben. Thanks, Oren. Thanks, Jubilee. Hello, everyone. My name's Joe Hagan. I use architecture and also of an event space called the Institute of Light, and now in its fourth iteration as number 10. Use Architecture was named at the beginning of my architectural career. Rather weirdly, in terms of having nothing to do with architecture whatsoever at all. It stood for the United States of Europe, and it was a time when I just finished my my degree, and there was a very big recession going on at the time. So I decided architecture wasn't such a good thing to do, and I pursued my other passion, which was music. So I started a collection of DJs and musicians and dancers, rather presciently called the United States of Europe. That's what U stood for. And very strange, I never actually thought that we would be on the verge of leaving Europe at the time. It was a fantastic place to be, and it still is. And sadly, we won't be there for much longer. But the DJ collective was called the United States of Europe. And since I had all the graphic artwork at hand for use, I just decided to transfer to use architecture rather than, have to pursue another design adventure. So use architecture stood for literally use architecture. It also at various times stood for the United States of Ecstasy, and also the acronym Urbane and Sophisticated Environments. And my favorite, the last one, was called Useless Architecture, which was a completely and utterly euphoric architecture which had no practical purpose whatsoever. And that kind of follows on, that playfulness, into the projects I'm going to talk. The Institute of Light was originally the Institute of Stop Film Company, started in 1925 in Rome, and it was basically started as a company to hold film stock, but then was appropriated by the burgeoning fascist regime at the time, led by Mussolini, who appropriated it for his own propaganda arm. And it was really developed to articulate, celebrate, and propagate the might of the Italian nation at a time when it was very bombastic. But it consisted of some very, very interesting filmmakers who were into the polemical side of film and the educative side of film. So, obviously a very, very, very difficult time for any creative. But at the time, they were seen to be part is now with history is obviously very, very questionable. But at the time, if you were creative and you wanted to explore what film could do, you joined the Institute of the Lucha. It was, as we said, it was located in Rome, and it was existed for about 10 to 12 years. And then it really began to distance itself politically from the polemic which was being forced on it. And in 1926, it ceased to depend directly on the Prime Minister, and it separated itself as if you like, an independent collective. It was really radical in terms of its graphic representation and its subject matter. And that didn't sit very well with the fascists. So they explored very, very, very adversarial methods of filmmaking, and very intrusive methods of filmmaking. It was a new medium film, and it was a film which generated at the time a lot of interest. And basically, the fact that they moved away from the fascists was the fact that they're moving far more towards the left in terms and more of a social agenda in terms of what they wanted the Institute to actually perform and work as. After the war, it began to link with a film studio. It's called Cinecittà, and Cinecittà was the primary film studio which fueled the Italian neo-realist movement. All the classic films that we know that were made by Fellini and also by his associates at that time were filmed in Cinecittà. And Cinecittà eventually became Luce Cinecittà, and joined up with Cinecittà to form both a film studio and also an archive, a stock archive of work, which was kept in the nation.
Work tomorrow.
Yeah.
Hello, sorry. Now, this organization and both Cinecittà and Luce Cinecittà formed the inspiration for a project which I was involved with on a consultative basis called the Institute of Light, and it was inspired by that name, the Institute of Light. It was a quite radical film studio which was situated in a former gasworks. You can see behind the warehouse there that there's a disused gas pylon there. At that time, in the early 90s, there was a lot of derelict land in London. As I said, we started practicing just after the recession of that time. And I think about 8% of the land in London at that time was derelict. And Mark Bailey was a friend of mine who I'd grown my college career with. And he went to the London College of Printing and studied graphic design and eventually became a very successful photographer. But with that success came a disillusionment with the commercial side of photography, and inspired by the spirit of the Institute of Light, he formed a studio, a film and photography studio in a disused warehouse, this gasworks are just off the King's Road. And I'm slightly pretentious to say this now, but at that time we were very much inspired by the punk ethic of, if you want to do something, you can do it. Don't let anyone stop you. Anyone can do anything. So we were just quite young guys and not much money, but a lot of drive and ambition. And we managed to persuade British Gas to rent us this studio space very cheap. And Mark opened this studio. He had some actually quite high-profile clients, from Nicole Fahy, the fashion chain. He photographed people from the music background, and also from the fashion background as well, and basically used these studios. These are some of the interiors in here. As you can see, you know, these spaces weren't designed as studio spaces, but they were big and had tall ceilings. And once we'd neutralized the spaces and filled them with as much light as possible, they were really fantastic spaces to work in. At the same time, we began to be really interested in an architect called Cedric Price. I don't know if many of you know of him, but he was an architect who was unbelievably influential without ever actually building much. And those are the kind of architects that really change the world. And in terms of what architecture can be, and what the way we should approach architecture. And he was very much fired at the same time as the Institute of Light was informed by revolutionary zeal pre this Second World War, and after the First World War, when the communists and the socialist regimes were very much a threat in Europe. And in the same way, Price was informed by the post-war engagement with technology, if you like, and the liberating aspects of technology. And the technology that we take for granted now was seen as an incredibly liberating and euphoric medium. A particular project which was never built, but has remained influential, and in fact informed many buildings, was the Fun Palace, Cedric Price's Fun Palace. And he developed this project with Joan Littlewood, another experimental theatre director. And the Fun Palace was a space which was not a space and not a physical space. It was a space which was designed to enable people to spontaneously enjoy the leisure which the brightened and polished future was going to bring to us. So it was set up as a space and a framework for people to come and engage and to experiment. And in order to encourage this experimentation, oppositional leisure modes were set up. So work was meant to be enjoyed at the same time as leisure. Education was fun. Success meant failure. Boredom meant you should overwork. Loneliness also paired with lack of privacy. Rich, poor, and summer and winter. And we could go on. There could be many, many more. This is a diagram which explains how the Fun Palace was meant to work. And it was seen as a space that was designed in terms of time rather than just in terms of a physical reality. So the hierarchy of space was determined by the amount of time that you spent in the space. So the more time you spent in the space, the bigger the space was. And it was particularly detailed in that way to encourage that kind of engagement. And it was seen as a physical framework into which a series of flexible activities could be inserted and could be engaged at any time. So it was a building that changed, and it changed in response to its users' desires and requirements. So you could have theatrical space, you could have cooking lessons, you could have bicycle repair shops, you could have a disco, seen as a space that was ultimately flexible and usable at any time. And it really realized itself in the Pompidou Center. I mean, physically, the similarities are there. In terms of its program, the similarities are even more there. And also at the time, rather enticingly, it caused a real shock when it was built in Paris, because Paris is a very traditional city, as we all know, and it's preserved by the French in a way that celebrates its history. And this was seen as a history, this was seen as the history that was being questioned right in the heart of Paris, to plonk this technologically informed and really rather aggressively articulated building in the middle of everything that was held dear in terms of tradition, was just seen by an affront. But as ever with brilliant buildings, it's going to be loved and become part of the Parisian landscape. All of this ferment of ideas, we couldn't wait to put into practice. So Mark and I embarked on a series of projects, the first of which was the Portobello Pop-Up. And this was a cinema space which was designed to be inserted under the Westway. It was part of a, it wasn't part, it was an entry for a competition for found spaces. So we could go out into London, one could go out, and I think the competition's still going on, it's an RIBA competition, it started out, so I think it still is. One could go out into the city, one could find a space that wasn't being used, and one would probably use for it. So under the Westway, very, very enigmatic spaces, you know, very, very futuristic spaces when they were built, all about speed, movement and brutality. And we thought it'd make a rather good cinema. So we did two things. We basically greened the space by inserting an artificial lawn on it, and we encouraged people to come and watch film on a casual basis. So the film would be continuously on. You paid in terms of time of when you wanted to go and actually engage and watch the film, and you could go in and out at any time, and it doesn't matter if you were in at the beginning of the film or in at the end of the film. It was seen as a leisure pursuit in the same way that Price encouraged us not to be in a straitjacket about the way that we engage with our leisure. Very simply built with a series of gabion walls on the steel framework and a platform, and then the screen itself was surrounded by a series of helium balloons to backlight it. The next project we embarked on was for an artist called Hassan Hajjaj, and he appropriates found objects, African found. Africa's full of reuse. Amazingly vibrant art is produced from rubbish, or what we perceive as rubbish. And Hassan celebrates this in his work and his shop as well. And he asked us to design a Moroccan riad, which could be built in a week and be made out of not exactly found, but discarded materials, which are basically Coca-Cola crates. And also he thought he might be able to get those Coca-Cola crates really cheaply and sponsored by the Coca-Cola Corporation. This is some of his artwork here. So we designed a riad which was structural elements were made from Coca-Cola crates. They took the form of a traditional courtyard entrance with a meeting space at the back and a circulation space in the center. We then took this idea of a portable building for the second of our found spaces projects, which was called Pop Pantechnicon, Pantechnicon is a mobile visual device. And we put forward the idea that we would use a container to carry all of the crates and to form a studio, an art gallery, and a cinema as well. So the container would arrive on site with a load of pre-prepared crates. The crates would then be taken out and assembled to form the gallery. And then the empty container would be a cinema and a gallery space as well. So it's a multi-visual cinema space with multi-screens in the container and a gallery on the outside. We got asked finally, after these 3 projects, to build it. And we got asked by the Kensington and Chelsea Arts Committee to build a pavilion to celebrate their arts festival in Powis Square. Powis Square is a strong cultural history. It was during the late 60s, during the students' revolts, it was occupied for about 6 months by a motley crew of anarchists and socialists and whateverists. As a response to that occupation, the local authority eventually made it a public square. Most of the squares in London are actually private, but this is one of the few public squares. And it's got a very strong communal element to it. And Kensington and Chelsea celebrate it every year. This was the first time I think we were asked to build a pavilion to celebrate their festival. So a very dear departed friend of ours called Tim Burke came to us and said, look, I love what you do with rubbish. Why don't you build us an art gallery and a studio that we can use for a couple of weeks to engage with the community? And the only prerequisites for it were it had to be built in 2 weeks, designed and built in 2 weeks. It had to be designed and constructed in 2 weeks. It had to last for a week, and it had to cost £20,000. Those were the elements of the design brief. So we developed the ideas that we'd had with the Riad and also the Portobello Pop-Up, and we came up with a design which involved 2,000, I think, borrowed beer crates, 5,000 bottles of water, which had gone past its sell-by date, and acted as ballast for the structure. This we made into a gallery space. It was there for the community to use for a series of workshops on art therapy. So we'd have artists come spend the day, talk about their work in the morning, and then try to encourage a variety of groups ranging from ex-offenders to kids with learning difficulties to come and engage and just take some time where you can kick back and just explore the creative side of your psyche, being guided by someone who seemingly knew what they did. And it was great success. It was great fun. It lasted 2 weeks and it was taken down, and then all the water was poured into all the gardens surrounding the square in order to help and give something back to the community. That I don't know if any of you are film buffs, but that house behind The three people in the frame there is the house from, I believe, from Performance, a very famous film with Mick Jagger. The Institute of Light. So we were working with a client called Barely Breaking Even Records. We'd worked with them on a couple of festivals, and they asked us to look for office and shop space in London, which they could use both as a space to sell their records from, and also as a space and a communal space for people who wanted to come and have a physical experience with them rather than a virtual one, because they, as many record companies, were selling most of their stock online. You know, it's an expensive thing to set up a record store and to rent, and the overheads are quite low. So they came to us at the time because we're located in London Fields, and at that time it was relatively cheap and easy to get a railway arch. We also had a client who was engaged with pop-up film festivals called Cigarette Ends, and they were looking for a permanent space, and we thought, well, these two things can come together. Why don't we put you two clients together, and then we can come in with you as well, and we can share the space. So this grew into what we coined at the time a cultural hub, which would encompass encompass and celebrate analog culture. At the time, we were taking an anti-Pricean stance, if you like. We were growing disillusioned with digital culture. BB Records were selling primarily vinyl, and vinyl was fast beginning to outsell CDs. And I think 2 years ago, finally outsold CDs. Everything that went with analog, we celebrated. We have 35mm film projector. We cooked slow street food. And we also wanted all of these elements of culture to be mixed up into one space and not separated and delineated in the same way that Price had celebrated the spontaneity and the euphoria of culture with a digital future. We kind of look back. There's a Ghana saying, I come from Ghana, which is called Sanko, and presented he's got his neck and it's called Sankofa, and going forward. So we were looking back to you know, Price forward to a digital future to inform the past. The terrible under railway arch, two big railway arches with a yard in just off London Fields, and to persuade Network Rail to this is in the initial plan. There were two railway arches. On the left-hand side is a very old 19th century arch, and then on the right is an early 20th century arch, much more robust, made from engineering brick. The old arch on the left was made from London stock, was very porous and quite damp. So there were two different experiences in the space. Focused at the bar and a bar for the cinema. And the cinema itself had terraced seating, which could be demountable. We always thought it would take 2 hours to demount it, but it actually took 8 hours to demount and put back up. So you didn't do it unless it was going to be a very big event. And we also, wanted both space to have multi. So during and up in Clapton down and use the space, and B records were cinema during the day, and then at night, in the evening, they returned back to their primary functions. These are some images from our brochure, which shows times and how they has changed over a 24-hour period. That's a brochure that we developed for this light, and it then grew into a more flexible and independent format. And this is the built space as it was at the time there. We in the spirit of and in the spirit of sustainability, if you like, and in that African spirit that we spoke about earlier, we use primarily building materials which weren't meant to be finished materials, but were meant to be materials which were temporary and thereby cheap and thereby robust. So basically just polished all, we stripped the walls back, we bought some second-hand beats. It took us a long time to find them. We found a company that stripped down and replaced parts for existing planes that were in the air. Sofas made, I'm afraid we didn't find those and they weren't appropriate, but we because it was translucent and light material, and within the space there are no light fittings. Even though it's called the Institute of Light, you can't see a light fitting anywhere. Everything is hidden. A quite radical program we started with, and of course we spent a lot of time working out this program, and not many people come unless you're an established art house cinema. But that's not why we were doing this. We were doing this because we wanted to offer people something different, and we opened with a program called Americana, and it was just 4 years ago. The cinema opened showing Dr. Strangelove. I don't know if anyone knows this film, but it's an incredible film by Kubrick, whereby a mad American politician sets off a nuclear bomb nuclear strike on Russia by mistake, and in the spirit of mutual self-assured mutual destruction, they have to blow up their own environment as well as the Russians. Very, very strange at the political time that we've got now. And it was, we actually opened it on the night of the American election when Trump was actually elected into power. This is the rear of that poster and that handout, and it kind of shows the kind of program that we had and the relationship between the food and the music and the bookstore as well. This is the bar space itself. That was the cinema. The polycarbonate cube hanging above the bar is the projection room, and to the left is the bookstore. Everything was on wheels, so all the music was on wheels, and we could locate it back into its storage space in the evenings when it opened as a bar, and then we just wheeled the stuff out during the day. So the space transformed physically over time. The front of the bar is a reclaimed fuselage of an interior the cabin space from a Boeing 747, I believe. We traded for about 2 years and had wonderful films, brilliant time, great fun, and didn't make any money. So we decided to relaunch, keeping the spirit of the Institute alive, as number 10. And we primarily focused on events rather than staying open on a regular basis, because we only opened when it was worth our while. But that meant that our program got a lot more diverse, and we could have anyone from the Serpentine Gallery doing a week of feminist film. We had the Royal College of Art launching its summer school. We had the Whitechapel Gallery running an opening there. We had the Photographers Gallery opening an exhibition. We had lots of people having their weddings there. It was great fun. And the fact that we orientated towards events meant that the events were special. And even though commercial cinema with a really, really, adventurous program can work really well, you have to have an established audience in order for it to do it. So what we then did is we had specialist cinema clubs. So we had film school, which dissected classical film and looked at the construct of and theory behind very influential films. We had science fiction theatre, which explains itself. And we also had yoga classes in the cinema. So the fact that we weren't open regularly as a bar meant that we could open specially and much more in the spirit of this. So that bubbled along very nicely until something terrible happened earlier this year. And we all had to close. And we just thought that's the end of it. We can't carry on. I mean, this is a space about people coming together to have fun and to be serious at times as well, not just fun. But they can't come together. So what are we going to do? What is the point of us existing any longer? And after sitting down and having a couple of meetings and thinking how we're going to disassemble all this, it became quite apparent to us. We had a kitchen at the time there called Honest Foods that did catering for film sets, and they were also very quiet. It became quite apparent people were staying eating more and they were dialing in food. Originally, we had one kitchen. Why don't we in the making community of kids like? So we so a company called and also work the vegan on a more conventional level, as we discussed. This is the record shop on Record Store Day. Cinema. So during the day, that's a and a lounge, and at night it becomes an event and a party space. The restaurant still. Cinema. We do something called pitchback playback, which is an immersive listening experience. Basically, one buys a ticket online and comes along, and we black out the entire cinema. So the only sense that you're aware of is sound. And dark, you designed for. And now this is quite a bizarre experience, sitting in a room listening to an unbelievable sound on a very, very good sound system, with your nose and your eyes and all your orifices covered up. We also do lectures, and this was a group of Syrian refugee support organizations came together to celebrate the year of having helped both people, individuals in Syria who have been made homeless and refugees as well. So they came, they showed some film, and they ate some fantastic Syrian food as well. And all the money went to a charity. So it was a company called Kino Vino who run this night on a regular basis, and it's wine and film. So it costs you £50, but you get dinner and you get to watch a brilliant film as well. Is the kitchen, and just some shots of the interior, and see how flexible and how spontaneous the space can be. And I think, just to finish up, really, I think, you know, one of the most important commodity, talking about communities and talking about engagement, the most important commodity of the Institute of Light has been time, really, and that's not something you can buy, because it's only by existing and being there and engaging with the community that we can actually survive all of the difficulties that it's gone through. We were very much a space seeing us, but that's established global survive they go through. Also, you know, to talk behind it, we always wanted a space that had its own character. Even though it's got elements of core language in it, and it has got a, if you like, and that epitomizes most accurately time. And there's something about that furniture that inspires confidence, and that married with a very, very raw industrial language, as well as an evocative language in the form of airline style, which immediately imparts a glamour on any interior, and also a retro glamour. You know, those three elements together form character, but impose character, and they're not overly stylized. And even though I'll say this myself, the thing about the space is oh great, what can I do here? None here, but I do here. I want to do that. I'm saying that we designed it with those particular, well, we did design it with those particular goals in mind, but it's not inherent in the language of the architecture that allows you to do it, but it's the composition of the space and the confidence of the space. At the same time, the innovating quality of the space allows us to survive with these communities. Yeah, there it is. Come and see it when you can and have some fun. Any questions? Any?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You spoke a lot about films. What's your favorite? Well, not your favorite, because that's probably a hard question, but like, what's a film that you like or watch a lot?
Oh, that changes all the time. I must admit, and it's not why I put it there. I do love Stanley Kubrick. I think he's fantastic. And Dr. Strangelove, I always find very, very prescient and very, very. It combines horror, if you like, with comedy, and terror with comedy, if you like. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's my favorite film, but Kubrick is my favorite director from each other, but they're of their own and crafted in such a special way visually. And I love his films because no one ever says much in any of them, but so much happens.
Yeah, his cinematography is absolutely incredible.
The range, of course, is amazing. And what I also find really incredible is that, you know, moving the Cedric Price, the open form, the ability, those things that you did in the concepts and the drawing and the work, the build, and your ability to talk about what you do and to describe it, despite it, and the way you just described, you know, the furnishings and everything else, and the ability of that to be so present, and also acknowledging the kind of, dare I say, symbolic, which we don't need to, but at the same time saying it's as flexible as. The invitation that it affords, you know, it affords people to come in, as you said, to engage, to make it their own. And because some people would have the argument, but there is a particular kind of style, and there is a kind of forceful nature to the furnishings, but in fact, there's something about it, and maybe we can't put our finger on it, but there's something about it which does afford the possibility of people coming in and making it their own and wanting to make it their own. And I just find that an amazing. It's not about a balance. It's just it's just a consideration in what you do, which exudes this kind of Cedric Price-ness, and at the same time does it in a way which is presently material and presently physical and presently, dare I say, spatially designed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be as arrogant as to say that I composed all of this in a postmodern sort of boiling pot to come up with this incredible range of references. But in the same way that Price has the positions about program, you have juxtapositions in terms of style, if you like, or in terms of function, then it encourages spontaneity. And it's funny because if you look at the Pompidou Center, it's very articulate in terms of its language. It's not a shrinking violet of a building. It has an overt style to it. Now, we had a space that was already there, and all we did that space different from making an object, which is what the Pompidou Center does and has to. But I think if it requires confidence to be able not to shout, if you like, and I think that's what we're trying to do.
I mean, what I sense about it is that whilst of course we know that the choice of things and everything, the way the ecologies of decision making go about, it's not about having necessarily a direct line or anything, but I think it has a lot to do, and I've known you a little bit, and you're expressing it has so much to do with your deep sort of belief, intention, understanding, particularly around, as they're looking at in this past series, around kind of community and ecologies of community. And, in a way, it's not that it doesn't matter what the thing looks like, it does, but through that kind of intention, the thing works. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a very strange community around there. I mean, I've been there for quite a long time in Hackney. It's seen an incredible amount. I mean, it must be the space or the area that's changed the most in London over the past 20 years. Here 20 years ago, that street literally was full of crack addicts and just, a building opposite. I went to look at a warehouse and I was shown around by a Vietnamese woman who owned one of the restaurants, and there was a cage in one of the rooms. It looked like a cage that you would keep a lion in. And I said to her, I couldn't believe it. I said, look, what do you keep in that cage? That's really weird. And she said, oh, sometimes we keep my brother in there. I said, when he gets really bad with his drug problem, we lock him in there until he's over it, and then we let him out. And that's that it was there 20 years ago. And I think it's fascinating that now you've got people, paying £12 for a focaccia sandwich when, you're more likely to get stabbed 10, 20 years ago. But that's about communities, that is about communities. It's taught to us at the Institute, and they're still there. And it is a 1-bedroom flat that costs £500,000. Those are all communities, and we need a space that addresses, that can have space for as many people as to be included possible. So yeah.
We've got a question in the
There's
chat.
another question in the chat.
It's in the chat. I don't know where the chat is. 16 chats there. Oh.
If you go to the bottom one, there's a question. There's a question there from. No.
Could you Okay, right. Could you touch upon how the light of the space influences the behavior of the people? Like I said, the light, even though it's called the Institute, the light, you can't live everywhere, because the elements of the structure and the construction behind it. You saw that slide behind us that's on the screen now. We can turn the space completely blue, backlighting the individual rooms with like that kitchen. So that in itself has a very calming people as they come in. The elements like the industrial language of the space, like the ducts, which are hanging up in that space, be floating because they're backlit and you can't see how they're suspended. So that maybe engenders a feeling of wonder, if you like. But it's quite, if anything, at times it's quite dimly lit. And that's because we want it to be of the night, if you like. But at the same time, you can also be in the light comes straight through the main window and hits onto that projection space, and can be gloriously full of light. So it's orientated on an east-west, like east-west. It's always very cold and very dark, and the bar and the restaurant on the other full of light, and it's that's why we chose to orientate it in that way. Any other questions?
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
I have two questions actually. The first question I wanted to ask is kind of I really loved like the temporary like coat structures that you designed, and also the way that the Institute of Light is flexible. I was just wondering maybe if you could expand on how like temporariness like can inform like permanent design, and maybe like how like even as we design our own buildings, how we could use like um I guess the things you've learned from building temporary structures make more permanent structures.
Yeah, sure. I think I graduate towards temporariness because it's the opposite of what architecture really should be, and architecture is static and defined, and doesn't have an element of transition within it, and that's also informed from a desire for engagement with an experience rather than something that can be commodified. I mean, temp and found structures are structures that are flexible and encourage different kinds of uses, whereas I suppose institutions are very, very, very much rooted down in stability, and by their nature are inflexible and don't change. And I suppose what it goes back to is maybe sort of a romantic idyllic existence where you're not static. And what we all started doing as human beings and not staying in one space in order to have a far greater experience. And I just love the literal of putting something and then taking it down and becoming something else, and having another use. And I suppose, you know, Price was a quite serious architect, and it's fantastic that he espouses fun and engagement and spontaneity with culture in that way. So yeah, I don't think there's any really deep meaning to things being temporary, but that they're always open to change, which is a great thing to be.
Thank you. I did have another question as well. But yeah, thank you so much for that answer. I also wanted to ask like how can you design buildings in a sensitive way that like help the communities around it like are what they need without also like falling into like making gentrification happen?
Sorry, I didn't hear that last bit.
Oh, I was just saying like without gentrifying like the area.
Yeah, gentrification. It's I don't think things that are temporary gentrify necessarily. They're gone, you know, and it's this attitude decommodification. I mean, I also when I was what it's like to DJ and also to be an architect and to make space. I started the lecture saying that both things are about investing space with emotion. And one of them you don't bring any baggage, you engage in a room with people and you enjoy an evening together, which is authored by you. But if you weren't in that space, then you wouldn't be able to all enjoy it in the same way as everyone else did. So thereby it's difficult to be commodified in that way. Of course, DJs, everything's commodified. But if you had a great night listening to someone playing some fantastic music, or you went to the theatre, you saw a performance, you come away with that, carrying that experience with you, which other people can observe but can't engage in. Whereas architecture is the opposite of that. But it still is about investing space with emotion. So you as a designer invest the space with a certain engagement of emotion with the people who are in it. And to me, the one that can't be commodified and monetized is the more important, because it just remains in some way free. So yeah, that's why I don't necessarily think that everything should be temporary, but you can just move and go somewhere else if you don't know. That in itself is a decision. I'm looking at some of these other questions here, so I should ask it. I think we've spoken about permanence. D'Angelo leaves on there. Okay. Oregon. Thank you.
I'll have to go.
Stayed, I thought you were only going to be 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Joe, I made a call and I said I can't come yet, so it's all right.
Thank you. It's really fantastic to talk to you. And
Absolutely. Thanks again, Joe, for coming. Appreciate it.
Really enjoyed this, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. I just wish, we could do it in real time. But you know, when they allow us to come up and see the Institute like number 10, it's there and it will be for a while. Yeah.
Will do.
All
Cheers.
right.
Cheers.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Bye.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Jubilee. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for coming. And
Thank you. I
everyone for
really
listening.
enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It's fantastic. Really
I'm
good.
so
Yay.
glad. Have a good rest of your
Okay.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I hope you get your big hole sorted out.
Oh, yeah. Sort that. Yeah.
Cheers, Joe.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.